My husband doesn't want to have intimacy with me unless it is to conceive kids. I have recently gotten married to my husband, Edward, 2 months ago. We both attended the same church ever since we were little, and I started to like him over the years. At 20, we started gradually talking to each other and got engaged at 24. My husband is very religious and never misses a service. I, too, am religious, but not as much as him. We both respect the other's choice and it's not really an issue between us. However, when we were dating and engaged, he didn't come near me in any way. For example, we rarely held hands, and he never hugged nor kissed me on the cheeks, even though it's a form of greeting that's very used in our culture. It bothered me a bit, but I think that he was doing it out of respect. The roller coaster was our wedding night. During the ceremony, we danced for the first time, we held hands, and when we got to our hotel we hugged and he kissed me for the first time on my lips. It wasn't like making out or anything, just a peck. That's it, nothing else. We didn't do anything more, not even cuddled. We just showered and went to sleep because we were extremely exhausted. Right when I was about to fall asleep when we were talking, he told me that he won't do anything unless it is to conceive kids. I wasn't sure of what to say, so I just remained silent and dozed off. This literally crushed my expectations. Of course, I understand that he doesn't want to do anything, but really? Not until we decide to have kids? Which is minimum 2 years away. I love my husband with all of my heart and I would never leave him, as he is the best and most respectful human being I've ever met and an amazing person overall, but I can't seem to accept this. Ever since I was a teen, I have been addicted to Wattpad and to spicy stories, so of course, I have always dreamt of my wedding night. I didn't really want to keep my expectations really high because I knew that it will most likely not come to reality, but I never thought that this could happen. I was disappointed for the rest of our honeymoon, which lasted a week. I know it's my fault for not talking to him about it, but I was really afraid of doing so. You see, in our culture, it's not appropriate for a woman to talk about these things, nor initiate intimacy. Plus Edward is religious, like I said, so I was afraid of him judging me if I did anything that he could consider unholy or whatever. I even tried to seduce him for the past couple of months, but he wouldn't look at me, not in a mean way, but he would just laugh it off and give me a peck or something like that. It's really starting to bug me because I have a somewhat high drive and really want to do things with him. I can't help it. I don't really know what's the reason behind this, and I don't know how to address the subject with him. Once more, I will not even consider leaving him, so please all advice will be appreciated. Update. So, after posting yesterday, I was literally bombarded by hundreds of comments suggesting that Edward might be a homosexual and using me to cover up his sexuality. I wasn't ready at all for such a possibility, and it had never crossed my mind actually. Compared to other people from our community, we are one of the few who aren't homophobic, and we previously discussed our sexualities before. I don't want to really get into this topic, but Edward was really honest with me at that time that he is straight and that he just can't picture himself being homosexual, religious or not. Besides, we both have online jobs, so we are together literally the whole time and have mutual friends, so I would quickly have noticed any suspicious behavior. Today, I decided to confront him like many of you suggested. I had been repeating my script in my head and went for it. We were both chilling after having lunch, so I asked him if he wanted to talk about lovemaking and intimacy. He said yes and was curious about what was bothering me. I was direct and simply asked him why he won't do anything with me unless it is for kids. Edward got genuinely surprised and confused by my question. At that moment I just wanted to disappear from this universe and evaporate. Because of the embarrassment, I am not physically able to recall how the conversation went exactly, but it turned out that he thought it wasn't normal to feel aroused around me, nor to make love unless for procreation. I felt really bad for him. Apparently, that's what he grew up thinking, and that's what his friends and environment he grew up and abused him into believing. I cannot imagine that they did this to him. I'm sure it was to make fun of him and mess around, which led to completely messing up his view on sexual matters and desires, and there is no way that they also believe in this themselves. This conversation went on for a couple of hours. I realized that it must have been very hard on him to talk about this specific topic, so we had a rest from this subject and took a nap. After that nap, he apologized for not talking about this with me beforehand. We discussed many other things, and the fact that he never displayed any affection before our wedding was due to his beliefs. And don't worry, we also talked about our wedding night, but basically, he got turned on every time he came near me, so he felt extremely ashamed of showing it or acting on it and thought I was just teasing him. He also didn't want to do something that could be considered bad according to what they fed his mind with. Not gonna lie, I expressed to him my resentment and the way he never asked for my opinion on this matter. He apologized again and said that he was afraid of what my reaction would be if he expressed himself. We tried to sort things out and we promised to start working on physical touch. Edward said that he would never do anything that could make me feel down ever again and that he will always be ready to answer all of my questions. This realization was really like a slap across the face for him, so I suggested going to therapy. He immediately agreed, and starting tomorrow we will look for a therapist. Going on Reddit wasn't really the best idea, but it really gave me a push. Having this conversation was definitely something we should have done sooner, way back when we were engaged. Also, to everyone telling me to leave, Just because the problem was about intimacy doesn't mean I would leave him, of course. If this took another turn and if I found out that he was cheating on me or lying, I would have immediately divorced him without looking back. I know that intimacy is very important to couples and healthy relationships, but if Edward is not comfortable and has issues with this matter, I have no choice but to understand him. He has always been there for me and always showed me his love and support, just not throughout physical ways, so the least I could do is understand him and respect his boundaries. Until we talk everything out, I will not pressure him into doing anything and would rather do it step by step. In the end, we cried together and laughed about ourselves. Then, he made us some snacks that we had while watching our favorite TV series. Now, Edward is sleeping right next to me, closer than usual. I feel happy about it even though it's not much, but definitely considered improvement. I also feel much more better than yesterday. There are still many things that we need to discuss and so many more steps to take. I think I might update our situation later on, but right now I would like to thank all the kind comments and nice people who tried to reach out and cheer me up. So yeah. I totally lied about my friend's last words, and I will not honor her last request. My friend Amy died a couple of months ago and I was the last one to see her alive. I went over to her apartment, we watched a movie, ate dinner, I left to finish an essay, and then she OD'd and passed alone. She was 19. Our final conversation was unremarkable. I said it was good to see her, thanked her for the food, we made plans for the sports we were going to play together the following week. I told her I would send her a bread recipe we had talked about. She said she was excited to bake it to bring to a potluck that was coming up. She wished me luck with the essay and I said I would try, but Brian, my roommate, was always loud and distracting, so hopefully I could get it done before he came back from clubbing. She laughed, and the very last thing she said was, "Say hi to Brian for me." Amy didn't answer any messages the next day, so I sent her roommate, Kara, a message to ask if everything was okay. Kara had been staying nearby with her boyfriend, so she went home to see what was happening, and found Amy's body. She let me know what had happened, and after that there were police and all sorts. It was a shock and confusing, but I did not pry for details. Amy and Kara were incredibly close, practically sisters, so I absolutely did not want to bother her with questions, and the police had investigating to do. I was asked to describe the evening. Amy used substances frequently. They don't think the OD was on purpose, but they wanted to know if she was acting strangely. Had she taken anything while I was there? What time did I leave, etc.? And the death was deemed not suspicious. Amy had not contacted anyone online after I left, so I was the person she last spoke to. Kara asked me what her last words were. I lied. I said it had been to wish me luck with my essay, and that she hoped I had a good night. Amy had always been positive and had such a genuinely lovely soul. Well wishes were fitting last words. I did not say anything about saying hi to Brian. Why did I lie? Brian can screw off. There is a running joke among some of my friends about Brian's magical ability to make everything about himself. We wanted to do a little Great British Bake Off for fun. Brian buys a sparkly suit and declares himself Paul Hollywood and yells through the whole thing. "You're doing a painting?" Brian can't draw, but until you physically leave he will lecture you about why you're doing it wrong. Never do improv with Brian, it's like improv with Michael Scott. A group of people want to do life drawing, Brian finds a way to be the exposed model. Any birthday features speeches and songs performed by Brian, whether you really know him or not. Someone was going to come out as gay and was planning a little picnic for it. Brian decided to come dressed as a drag queen to take the pressure off. Whatever sport or instrument or language you try to learn, Brian will insist he is better, or would be better if he tried to learn it, which he won't. He physically can't stand to not be the center of attention. I do not like Brian. I cannot wait to not live with him anymore. He thinks of himself as charismatic, and at first he truly seems that way, but over time you realize it's all just volume and narcissism. That said, many people do still like him, life of the party and all, while his older friends grow to despise him and gradually exit the group. I was one of the first people to find out that Amy had passed, and that evening I called my best friend to get it off my chest and because I needed to vent feelings. Brian heard. I should have been more careful, but I wasn't in my right mind. He asked for more details. Why did he need more details? Because he had already started drafting a mass message to send to all of Amy's friends to let them know that she had passed. Amy and Brian met maybe twice. I told him he couldn't send it. This was on the day I found out. The police were only just involved. We didn't even know if her parents knew yet. He went off on a whole explanation of how he could find them on Facebook and could check land records to find their house, and go there in a suit with a bunch of flowers to sit them down and properly inform them. I said the police would tell them, or Kara. As I said, Amy and Kara were close. Kara is from another country, so she spends summers with Amy's family, practically like a second daughter. Why on earth would Brian, a total stranger, be a more fitting messenger? He said he had thought that he should get to be the one to tell them. I remember it well, because get. For non-native English speakers, you get to be player one, you get to have an extra piece of chocolate cake, you get to dress up, you get to have a little treat that you want. You absolutely do not get to tell someone that their daughter has passed away. This anti-Brian rant is getting too long. He held off on telling most people until after Amy's parents put out an official statement. though then gloated about having known about the news beforehand. He seemed to think that he would be able to speak at her funeral, but compromised and spoke instead at an informal gathering of friends that we held to honor her. He gave several speeches which, if you weren't aware that the two barely knew each other, would make you think that they were very close. He led a number of vigils, events, gatherings, which, yes, were a good mourning opportunity for many people, but I'm too far gone with disliking him that I can't see it as anything other than him trying to gain an ownership of the situation. We put together a fundraiser in Amy's name for a mental health organization she had used, and Brian was upset that he was not listed as a contributor. He did not donate. We had a book where anyone could write about their memories with Amy. Kara wrote a half-page, Brian wrote 2.5. I do not like to lie. It makes me feel sick to my stomach. A couple of months have passed and the knowledge that I actively lied about Amy's last words is gnawing at me. It's so small and dumb, but I didn't say hi to Brian for her. I said I would. She made her last ever request and I'm denying it. I'm sorry for the paragraphs about what a massive jerk he is, but I hope it demonstrates my point. This is what he is like. This is how he behaved thinking a mutual friend he'd only met a couple of times had passed away. Imagine what he would have been like if he knew that her last words were about him. I confess, channeling my negative feelings into hating how he has turned this into a main character moment has channeled them away from me, and the obvious fact that I left her alone to pass away. I think my anger at myself for the lying might be part of the overall guilt I feel about it, but that's what therapy is for. Thank you for reading. I have given this a lot of thought and I'm not going to tell anyone what she said, but I needed to get it out of my brain and into words.
I walked in on my fiancée cheating. Imagine my shock when I saw my father in bed with her. For some backstory, my wife Leah, 26 female, and I, 27 male, met in her freshman year of college. We were both dorming in the same building where we eventually met. We later found out we lived 2 towns away from each other, so whenever we went home, I let her drive with me. It only added like 20 minutes, so it was no big deal. After multiple trips and hanging out at school we started to date. I have a pretty close-knit family, and so does she, so we told our families right away. I had met her family plenty of times when dropping her off, but it was nothing more than an introduction and exchanging pleasantries. Both of our families accepted each other with open arms and our relationship grew. I was a year ahead of her, so when I graduated, I went home where I was offered a good job with great pay. I visited her at school whenever I got the chance, and whenever she came home, we would make time for each other. After she graduated, she moved in with me as both of our jobs were in the city near where we grew up. Like me, she was offered a position at the company she works at now with great pay. After living together for about 3 years I proposed, and we have been planning our wedding since. Now to the story. Looking back, there was plenty of things I overlooked, that I just wrote off thinking my father was just trying to welcome my ex into our family. Things like my father calling her all the time, and if I was around, they would just tell me they were talking about the upcoming family party or something along those lines. One time Leah was in the shower and her phone rang. I seen it was my dad, so I answered. When he realized it was me, he sounded both upset and surprised that I picked up. I then asked what's up and he responded that he wanted to talk to Leah about my mother's birthday. That was in a week, and after a minute, we ended the call. Even typing this out now I feel like such an idiot for not seeing it sooner. On the day I found out, it was like any other day. Leah had Thursdays off, so she made breakfast for both of us. When I set out for work, she gave me a kiss and told me to have a great day. During my drive to work I realized I had forgotten some paperwork I would need for a meeting I had at 3 p.m. I shrugged it off and told myself I would just go home at lunch to get it. Leah texted me throughout the day talking about all the casual stuff a couple talks about, like what do you want for dinner, I did the laundry, do you want me to hang it up for you, blah blah blah. I didn't think it was necessary to text her that I was coming home for lunch, so when it came around, I just left work and went home. When I got home, I noticed a car that looked like my father's in our parking lot, but I didn't think anything of it and just parked and went into our building. When I opened the door, I was met with a scene out of a movie where a man comes home early and catches his spouse cheating. Such a cliché. There was a trail of clothes, both his and hers, leading to my bedroom, and the sound of faint noises echoed through my apartment. I stood at the door in utter shock. My brain was a mix of rage, sadness and disgust, but if you were a fly on my wall, you would see what looked like a statue. I just couldn't move. When I finally snapped to, not knowing how much time had passed, I took out my phone to record. I picked up all the clothes that were on the floor and threw them into the hall of the building. After, I filmed the walk to my bedroom. The door was open. I stood in the doorway filming for about a minute and then flipped on the lights. They both jumped at the sudden light and looked at me, and to my utter shock, it was my father in the bed with her. After the initial stun, my father noticed I was recording and started to panic, trying to find anything to cover himself and telling me to stop recording. He found a towel and wrapped it around himself and started to walk toward me. I told him if you don't want to get hurt, stop coming to me. He either didn't care or didn't hear me and reached for my phone. I hit him square in the jaw. His head bounced off the door and slumped to the ground. Leah shrieked. I aimed the camera at Leah and said, concerned about your buddy, but nothing to say to your fiancé? My father woke up after about a minute and I told them I just needed to come pick something up for work, so I'm heading back now. If either of you pieces of crap are here when I get back, I'll send this video to everyone you know. I ended the video, looked at my dad, and said, you're dead to me. You're no longer my father, but you might want to go home and talk to mom because I'll be talking to her very soon. I sat in my car for a while until one of the bosses at work called to ask where I was. I told her I was on my way back right now. When I got to her office to hand her the paperwork, I must have looked awful because she started asking what was wrong with me. I told her it was nothing and I'd be okay. I could see her scanning me up and down and she noticed some blood on my collar and stood up, rushed to me, and said, "You're bleeding." I looked down and said it was my father's. She looked confused, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. She watched it in its entirety. She was introduced to Leah a few times but never my father. She sat there silent for a moment until it finally clicked that my fiancée was cheating on me, but not only was she cheating, it was with my father. She asked if there was anything she could do, suggesting I take some time off, but I told her I can't go back there right now. That I just need a minute and I'd be fine for the meeting, and I have another shirt in my office. The meeting went over fine. I put on a smile for everyone like nothing had happened. My boss came up to me after the meeting and asked how I could do that, but I just said I don't know and went to my office. I then came home, and I was alone for the first time in a very long time. Thank you for reading. I'm sorry I carried on so much, but it was therapeutic getting everything down. I just don't know what to do. I definitely need to get the heck out of this apartment. I just can't live here anymore and there's no possible way I'm sleeping in that bed. I know not only do I have to go get checked out for STDs, but I think I broke something in my hand.